Welcome to our presentation on building AI apps. Thank you for joining us today. In honor of the Halloween holiday, we've built an agenda that we hope will take some of the fear out of building AI apps. To help us cover this topic, we've put together a panel of experts from Valorem Reply and Microsoft. As each of these folks start their sections of the presentation, they'll do a little bit more of a detailed introduction for themselves. But I will go ahead and start. My name is Ryan McCamey. I head up our social impact and nonprofit practice at Valorem Reply, which means I work very closely, my team and I work very closely with Microsoft's Tech for Social Impact organization, as well as the different nonprofit customers that are part of that organization. And we deliver intelligent solutions to help them achieve their missions and solve their most pressing problems. I've been with Valorem for 3 years, and I've previously been focused on product transformation, where we also were building and designing intelligent applications.
Sorry, guys.
All right, got it back.
Okay.
All right, so moving on. Thank you again. We'll cover some things in this sequence here. We'll start with Amanda. She will review Azure's AI services, what's new. What's really fitting for the large organization as well as the smaller startups that are just kind of getting their AI foundation going. She'll talk about AI models that are available to you to custom tune to your data. And then Israel will share some best practices and tips for ensuring security of your data in preparation for AI solutions. And then finally, Jeff will walk us through how to put some of these concepts into practice with some real world AI solutions that we've already built for customers. And then we'll look at what's next for application development and how you can decide between a build versus buy strategy for accelerating AI innovation in your organization. As you can see, we've also saved time at the end of the session for some live Q&A. So we're being recorded. You can put your questions in the chat, and then we'll cover those when we get to the end. A little bit of background about who we are. We are Valorem Reply. We are a part of a larger reply network of 15,000 consultants and 100+ different technology organizations. We partner with our customers across a wide variety of industries, and we provide end-to-end services across strategy, design, and system integration. We have a strong hyperscale partnership with Microsoft, which puts us at the forefront of innovation within AI, digital experience, business transformation, cybersecurity, process automation, data, and more. In addition to everything we're doing out in front of our customers every day, we also have an internal organization that focuses on driving expertise and knowledge creation by staying out in front of technology, looking out over the horizon to see what's next. These are our 16 communities of practice. These are global, cross-functional, cross-organizational teams of technology practitioners that are looking into very cutting-edge technologies. So we've got a team focused on quantum. We've got a sustainability group. We've got metaverse, immersive technology, cyber, digital experience with an AI overlay really to all of this. And so as these guys work around the world, they're experimenting and sharing knowledge and findings with the rest of the Reply network and with the customer base to help identify the next generation of technology solutions that'll change the way we work. Our Microsoft expertise is broad. We are a prioritized Microsoft Cloud solutions partner across all 6 solution areas, including app innovation and data and AI, which is where we're going to spend a lot of time talking today. We have the breadth of experience and advanced specializations across the Microsoft product suite, so we can be your one single source partner in building a secure, reliable, and valuable AI solution. Here you can see our primary practice areas. Within these areas, we work again across the Microsoft technology plays, but also we underpin that with some consistent experiences. So we provide a customer experience, digital strategy, adoption and change management, which is always very important when you're talking about rolling out AI solutions or anything kind of in this new technology space, enterprise technology, and of course, research sort of underpins everything we do. And with that, I will pass it over to Amanda.
All right, thanks so much, Ryan. Really appreciate that introduction. I'm going ahead and present, share my slides. But For an introduction, I'm Amanda Wong. I'm a cloud solution architect specializing in AI, ML, and most recently, generative AI on Azure. And today, as Ryan mentioned, I'm going to be talking about what's new in Azure AI services. We've had a lot of innovation happening in this space since OpenAI on Azure became available just 2 years ago, and a lot of the news can be overwhelming for folks. So today we're hoping to disambiguate that, remove some of the fear around how to even get started and where to begin. So with that, let's dig in with an overview of the suite of Azure AI services. So within Azure AI, we have many types of research and areas, including language, speech, vision, all the way to custom machine learning that you can see on the far right. So all of this falls under the umbrella of Azure AI, whether it's document intelligence, such as understanding information from large amounts of unstructured data and documents like PDFs and extracting those, as well as responsible AI tooling, including our AI content safety service that detects different types of harmful content, as well as Azure AI Search, so that you can take all of this information, make it reachable and understandable, given large amounts of data. So that's a quick overview so that we can help place ourselves throughout this conversation as we discuss the different services available. And of course, OpenAI is really at the heart of a lot of these services as well, sharing a lot of similar technologies that drives the LLM innovation forward. So let's break it down a bit further into the different platforms that we have within Azure AI. We're seeing more customers integrate both generative AI, which we've seen more recently regarding large language models, or LLMs for short, as well as classic AI services that can be found in traditional machine learning. So within the Azure AI portfolio, we have the Azure AI Studio, which is the one-stop shop or development hub for building generative AI solutions. We're going to be talking a lot about this Azure AI Studio as we reference some of the large language models that have become available more recently and tooling so that you can get started with building your generative AI solutions as quickly as possible and iterating on those. Within the studio, you'll also find those Azure AI services that I just showed you before, including OpenAI Service, Azure AI Search, all of these that give you pre-trained APIs so you can get started with developing. On top of that, I mentioned machine learning. So for more traditional AI development, you can build advanced data science models and have more control over the custom model design and that full lifecycle management. This is really where the heart of Azure AI began, giving our developers the tools to basically create their dreams from models from scratch. And through our vast model catalog, which I'll be talking about as well, we have responsible AI tooling built into those, as well as tools that you can harness to evaluate your applications and your models for secure and trustworthy applications. So let's talk a little bit about the over 1,700 models that we have on the catalog. We don't have nearly enough time to dig into all of them today. So here's just a quick snapshot of some of the most popular frontier and open source models that we have available on our model catalog within Azure AI Studio. So on the top left, we have the OpenAI service models, the GPT ones that you're probably familiar with by now that really drive that traditional chat GPT experience, as well as ones for multimodal experiences, ones that are not just text-based, but video and image-based. We'll be touching on those in a bit. These also include the Phi models that have come out of Microsoft Research, a really exciting suite of small language models that are open source and available for commercial use today. But that's not all. We really want to enable customer choice when it comes to selecting large language models or even small language models. So that's why we've partnered with great organizations, not just OpenAI, but we have Meta and Mistral AI, as well as Cohere, many of whom deliver really competitive and capable large language models that deliver different types of use cases and enable that customer choice. So let's make this a bit more concrete and give a sneak peek into what this looks like with Azure AI Studio for those who may not have seen that before. Okay, so let's talk about some of the use cases now that you've seen an overview of the portfolio itself, some interface with the Azure AI Studio to help visualize where all of this is taking place. So we've come pretty far in the past 2 years. As I mentioned, we started a lot with chatbots. That was really the big opening use case when this technology became available. But now we're thinking bigger with our partners and customers about other use cases. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today, how to do it securely and make it real, which Jeff will cover as well today. So we really want to enable areas of productivity, increasing automation, improving customer experience, and building creative content. So here are general buckets on to get you thinking on how you can apply this to your industry to really showcase how versatile the capabilities of Azure AI can be across these various industries. Whether you are trying to modernize internal processes or external processes, with the amount of customer choice we enable from the model level to the skill level within Azure AI Studio, from low code, no code to full custom code. We really want to create an experience that is accessible to all developers. Here's a more granular use case overview. Please feel free to take a photo of this and reference it, ask us questions about this throughout the session, and we're happy to address them. But really, ones that I want to call out, for example, is code generation. So oftentimes, building an application can be quite resource intensive, time intensive. So GitHub Copilot and some of our large language models more recently that we'll talk about are very capable of addressing code and outputting that automatically to save our developers a lot of time. Agents are quite popular as well, and a really great use case for agents, which can execute multiple steps on behalf of the user and do a lot of chain of thought reasoning to use logic to figure out what is the best action item based off of this input and interaction I'm getting from the user. So a great area for that is in contact centers for improving customer service as well. And then with our multimodal models, it's really great to build different types of creative content and iterate on that quickly so that you can take your product and launch it to market more quickly. So here's a brief overview on how you can do this with your specific data, because oftentimes these large language models are very capable out of the box, but they're even more powerful when they're tailored to your use case and your specific data in your specific environment. We also included in this diagram the option to include additional third-party data sources so that you can have a comprehensive approach to data analysis and decision-making, regardless of how you are currently conducting your data analysis right now, all within the secure environment of Azure AI to make it as seamless as possible to connect these different components. So that was an overview of what Azure AI is. That was really a landscape view of some of the use cases and where we are within the portfolio. Now let's dig into some of, the latest announcements as of October 24. So here are 8 top updates that I want to share with you. The first is OpenAI's GPT-4o mini model. We're going to get to this in a little bit, but it's very exciting due to the amount of the trade-off between cost and performance. It's a really good value model. The second one is Copilot experiences continuing to be integrated into Teams. Meetings, chats, enabled over your documents. You're able to utilize AI-enabled capabilities over all of those documents as well, so that you can have a comprehensive view of knowledge within your organization. And third is global deployments. So now that we have more regional availability and access to these new models at the lowest price with the highest throughput. We also have GPT-4o models that enable JSON outputs, which is really great for a code interactive experience to do that automatic code generation and processing that I mentioned earlier, especially the generation part. We also have the O1 series. I'm going to get to that in a little bit, as well as the Phi models, the 3.5 and mixture of experts, that's number 6. We have global provision in Azure data zones as well, which makes greater data processing assurances while accessing the latest models. And you can also do a lot better load balancing across regions within the selected boundary that the customer selects. And lastly, that I want to call out is the GPT-4o real-time API. And with this, it allows real-time audio input and output. So you have interactivity with an LLM using natural voice-based interactions that feel very authentic to a normal conversation. And this is part of the multimodal capabilities that we want to have available to our developers. So speaking of multimodal, what is it aside from a mouthful of a phrase? It's really a way of enabling experiences of how we navigate the real world through sight and speech, language, and translation as well. You can input and output images and video, not quite outputting video yet, but certainly inputting for various services that you see here, including the GPT series, Phi, and Azure AI Vision. So let's take a look at what that really means with GPT 4.0, for example. Now this model is generally available, and we consider it the most advanced multimodal GPT model that we have available. So it takes in text, it takes in audio, as well as vision, as well as the benefit of fine-tuning so that you can make it custom to your specific domain or industry or data set. This model is twice as fast with 5 times the throughput. And not only that, it is half of the price of what it used to be, so as well as compared to other models, making it an ideal choice for organizations looking to achieve really high performance at scale while optimizing their investment in AI. Here's a really quick example of what multimodality looks like when interacting with a GPT 4.0 model or Azure AI Vision. So in this example, we're asking it to generate a really detailed summary of an image. So let's say I'm doing marketing for real estate. It can describe what's happening in this image as well. So here it generates a title: tropical paradise awaits sun-soaked villa with private pool. So even though the pool, for example, is not fully within view, the large language model can intuit that it's there and generate a description that includes that. And then I can leverage this as a real estate agent or marketing and tweak it as needed. But if you want a smaller, faster version that is cheaper than other models, we have a mini version available of GPT 4.0. So these have really great capabilities as well, with fine-tuning being available. And now we have the O1 series that I mentioned earlier. This is a really exciting suite of models that are distinct from the regular series of GPT 3.5 and 4 models that we have seen even before. So here's a quick overview of what those are. These are really good at reasoning, solving complex problems, following chain of thought, and we're going to see this in a demo in a moment. So I'm not going to dig too deeply into this right now. So in fact, let's see it in action. Here we are within the Azure AI Studio chat playground, and let's start with a riddle. I mentioned that these models are really good at reasoning. So if Kate's mother has 5 daughters, the model is going to respond with the next best token based off of what it's been provided. But this may not be the correct answer. So let's try again with the O1 model series. And the correct answer should be Kate, because Kate's mother's daughter is Kate. So this uses the chain of thought reasoning and includes that there. So let's ask it another one related to math, where we give different letters certain values and we want it to add up to 100. So it's doing both the language input as well as the math reasoning, and is able to break it down into Markdown, and you can follow its logic to arrive at the correct answer as well. So we're going to see another demo within O1 series. Let's say that we want to create a Space Invaders game. So I gave it a quick description of what I want it to look like, and it's going to generate an HTML file. It's going to have visualization as well. Here's the code, for example. It doesn't currently have the capability to execute this, but what we can do is copy and paste that into an editor and run this. And there you go. We have a Space Invaders game, and all it did was take this from a brief description I gave it on what I wanted to look like and what I wanted it to do. So continuing this idea that it's really good at generating code, at doing math and logic. Here I am, a business, for example, and I'm giving it some sales data from the past couple months. So I'm looking for recommendations. I'm looking for some data analysis based off of what I've provided it here. And you can see it's represented in different columns separated by commas as well. So here it starts off with a really great overview of what it analyzes from within the data. And it's doing calculations on the back end. It's doing percentages, it's doing totals as well for amounts of volume of sales for the past couple months. It can also call out, sales are higher in certain areas or times, and it's been more successful with a discount program, for example. It also calls out that staffing also has an impact on this as well. So it's starting to identify patterns within the data based off of the volume of sales and what I've asked it to do. And because it's good at code, and it was able to identify those correlations between staffing and discounts, it gives suggestions, recommendations on what you can do to increase your sales even further. So increasing staffing on the weekends or offering certain discounts. So not only has it been able to summarize, calculate correlations, and provide recommendations, it does all of these in one step. And lastly, I'm going to ask it to generate some visualizations using code. And here again, we can copy and paste that into our favorite editor. And here we have some graphs. We can share this with some leadership to give an overview on some of the sales. So that was really just from one amount of data that we shared with it as well. So the takeaways from that, as you just saw, it can generate some pretty complex code, do some math calculations, problem solving, and analysis, as well as being able to follow pretty detailed instructions, as you saw with the game example and the business example. So as mentioned before, the O1 series, great for reasoning, math. There are different tiers for amount of processing and cost as well to consider. And the GPT-4o models, again, great for multimodal experiences, are really the frontier of LLM chats right now. But we do want to give a highlight to the small language models as well. So last month, we welcomed the latest addition to the Phi model family, Phi 3.5, a mixture of experts instruct that you can see on the far right. Excuse me, and this includes 16 experts and 6.6 billion active parameters. So that sounds like a lot of parameters, but it really is just a fraction of what was used to train some of the from other large language models that we're familiar with today. So this is available today in the Azure AI Model Catalog. This model has been really enthusiastically embraced because of the smaller compute power and greater affordability as a consequence of that, while still being very capable and competitive in terms of its performance, being multilingual and having really robust safety measures. So all of these are available within the Azure AI Model Catalog today. And it's a significant step forward in our state-of-the-art machine learning models that we have available today. So Phi is just a representation of some of the small language model experience. It's more cost-effective, it's really low latency, and with that, it's easier to manage and fine-tune as well. And I'm going to wrap up on my side really briefly with a sneak peek into a really exciting service that we have available in preview today, and it's our video translation or dubbing service. So with that, we're starting to see real-time interactivity. This is really going to, I think, transform a lot of use cases that we have available, and that's really exciting. In preview, you can use pre-trained out-of-the-box voices or personalized voice, which you can apply for, again, all in preview. So I'm going to end here before I hand it off to my colleague Israel to talk about taking all this technology and figuring out a way to build it securely in your application. When you work with us in Azure OpenAI Service, we do not make your data available to other customers. It stays within your tenant. We don't share it with other organizations, and we certainly don't use it to improve our models or OpenAI models. So you can have full trust and confidence when working with the enterprise-grade Azure OpenAI Service. Okay, so with that, I'm going to now hand it over to my colleague Israel to talk about how to do all of this securely.
All right. Thank you very much, Amanda. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you great.
All right. So I'm going to present my screen now. And you can let me know if you can see the first slide.
We don't see slides, but we see yeah, we can see the slide now.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and your attention today. I'm going to cover something that we typically don't really talk about, but I think it's very critical. A lot of times when we are building AI applications, we tend to focus on the capabilities of the language models, of the vector search environments, and all those cool features. But we don't really think about this particular aspect. So I'm going to cover that. But before we go into the technology, let's take a look at some of the things we do, in real life. If you are in a home is typically supposed to just keep you warm, and provides a place where you can sleep, a place where you can feel comfortable, a place where you can relax. But we go the extra mile to make sure that we are safe. We're able to lock our doors. We're able to lock the windows, and if a storm is coming, it's a place where we can stay for a while without having to worry about safety. When we get into a vehicle, the primary reason for us getting this vehicle is for us to go from one spot to another spot, but we do take into consideration the safety aspect of it, making sure that we can wear our seatbelt, there's airbags. If there's a collision, we can be safe. And if you're riding a bike, you have to put on the helmet. When you go on the airline to take off, the very first thing they do, even though we understand that the aircraft or the air vehicle is able to transport us to our location on time and carry all the luggage and all those things, we always have to emphasize the safety aspect of it. If you go on a boat, you have to make sure that you have the ability to survive if something goes wrong. So these are some of the things that we do in our normal life. And when it comes to building applications, a lot of times we don't really think about this until the very end or until when something drastic happens and maybe the application or the system has to be shut down, and it leads to a lot of distrust on the customer side and on the partnership side. A lot of times when you see these security incidents happening, it's generally not because we have people that are not capable or people that are not smart. It's just that the important part was kind of ignored because the main focus of the application was to make sure that it can chat properly, it can analyze the image, it can do all the AI capabilities without really thinking about why we need to make it safe. In this presentation, we're going to talk about some of the things we need to take a look at when we're thinking about building AI applications. And this has to happen at the very beginning of the conversation while we're designing it, even before we go to build it. So making sure that we use managed identities that are centrally located. This will make it easy to manage and control who has access to the application without you having to be like a keyboard expert or a security expert to build the app. Trying to separate the different components of the application. Sometimes we just bundle everything together, and when you want to make a change for a particular segment of your customer population, you end up having to do that for the entire application, and sometimes it brings in security gaps, it brings in regression defects and things like that. That makes it difficult to recover from. But we're also going to talk about how to segment the data access when you're doing retrieval augmented generation. So that's something that we're going to cover. And then how we can control access using private networking and some of the best practices and patterns for designing these applications. And then the last part is how do we monitor these applications to make sure that what was working in the beginning is still working, and if there's any vulnerabilities or if there's any security incidents that are happening, we can take a look at it and respond immediately, just like how you would do if your security alarm or fire alarm is going off. So the first thing has to do with using managed identities. It is important for us to bring this in when we are trying to manage the different entities and people or customers that are authenticating, and also what data access that they have. It's also important for us to remove codes, things like passwords or key access to certain resources that we have. Now, when we are building applications, a lot of times when you see all these demos on YouTube or TikTok or wherever you're watching this content, you always notice that if you pay close attention, the examples that we have just tries to make it as easy as possible to get started. Even though that helps you to prove your concept, once you're done with that, as you're designing the application, you have to make sure that you don't use the API keys in the application directly. Azure has gone through a lot of effort to make sure that all our software development kits, our SDKs, have the ability to use managed identity. So if you're using an API key in the application, like how you see here on line 6, is something that you have to try and stay away from because it is going to bring problems and make it much more complicated in the future. So you see things like this where like in line 2 here, we are using the API key in the application. And where is this API key coming from? It's typically coming from the environment variables or some kind of config file that a lot of times when I'm doing code review, I see people checking in these passwords into the Git repository. And then if someone now ends up seeing this repo, it becomes a big deal. It becomes a security incident, and we don't want to have this kind of practice in our application. To avoid that, it's good for us to use managed identity. So the default Azure credential is one of the options that we have, so that instead of you having to maneuver and manipulate all these passwords in different files and keep track of it and control who can see it or not see it, you can just use managed identities in your code. And if you authorize the application to have the identity that you have assigned, you can simplify how to control access to, whether it's a Cosmos DB resource, AISH resource, or any Azure resource that your AI application needs to implement the logic. So the previous example was the one for the search client, and this one here is how we can use managed identity to communicate with the language model without having to use the API key. So this makes it simple. When we use managed identities, we don't have to worry about the keys leaking in the application. We don't have to worry about having the best strategy to rotate the keys because that's not really needed anymore. And a junior developer or someone who's not really familiar with the process is not going to make any mistake to commit it into version control, and it makes it easier for us to develop the application because the deployment process is now simpler. When you use managed identities, every environment has their own authorization, so you don't have to worry about swapping the keys in the application or doing all those things. It just makes it much easier to develop with this strategy. The next thing I want to talk about is that when we have an application that is kind of complex. So some of these healthcare applications, some of these financial service applications have very complicated backends and very complicated business logic. You end up seeing the developers just building one large monolithic backend for all the different customer segments that we have. To do this makes it challenging when you need to simplify the business logic update. A lot of times people end up making a mistake where the behavior that they do for one customer ends up impacting all the customers that did not really have to see that. So it is always good to have like a separate backend for each experience, and that will make things simple. And when we do that, it makes it easier for us to tailor the functionality for the specific user experience. It also reduces the surface area of the API so that any kind of vulnerability that happens is only restricted to one area. And then it also eliminates the need for us to try to do any kind of authentication inside the user experience, like the mobile device or things like that. So it keeps it simple. The other thing I want to talk about is how do we control access to data? So if you have a chatbot that is able to answer questions by looking up the data sets in the database, how do you control access so that if you have maybe like something for HR where I can come in and say, okay, what is my my tax rate, what is my healthcare benefit, what is my salary, and things like that. it should be able to look up my information and tell me, because I should be able to see what my paycheck is and things like that. But I should not, unless I'm in human resources or I'm like a very senior executive, I should not be able to ask everybody, so what is Amanda's paycheck or what is Rachel's paycheck and things like that. So how do we make sure that when we are implementing this logic, we are using role-based access control so that our vector database or any kind of data store that we're using to bring in this information is restricting the access of the data that is retrieved only to what the authenticated user is allowed to see. So when you are thinking about building these applications, make sure that whatever data store you're using, whether it's for retrieval or augmented generation, or whether it's for function calling and all those things, the user or the entity that is making this transaction has the ability to see or change whatever they are attempting to see or change. That's the basic concept here. So some of our databases like Cosmos DB, like AI Search, has the ability to do this, and you can implement this, integrate this with our graph stores to link up the groups that the person belongs to the groups that are allowed to see the data in the database and the person that is logged in to implement that. If you have any questions about this, we can talk about this towards the end and we can expand on that. So when we do this, it makes it easy for us to control who can see and who can change the data. It also restricts it only to people that should have the access to see it. It splits up the responsibilities so that people that are have a higher clearance can do certain things, and people that have lower clearance can do certain things. And it allows you to manage insider threats if you combine this with some of the other strategies that we discussed earlier. And it makes the ability for you to adhere to certain compliance, like in the healthcare sector, we have the HIPAA compliance and the high-tech compliance, and it simplifies the data integrity so that people don't accidentally modify what they're not supposed to change or see. In certain areas like healthcare and financial service, and sometimes in education, and also some certain government agencies, the AI application is not approved if you don't have the ability to restrict the access of these resources into private networks only. All our services that we use, they have the ability, depending on the SKU, to be deployed in certain private networks. So if you have the need to do this, you can deploy a virtual network and then be able to deploy your resources into that network. Then anyone that wants to access the front end, the back end, and any of the resources has to be part of the private network to access it. So this makes it easy. And when we do this, it allows us to control the blast radius. We can also segment the component by network access. And if a security incident happens in one part of the system, it's not widespread because not everything is exposed to the public. Now we're going to take a look at some of the strategies that you might want to think about when you are deploying your applications. If you have a fixed quota to a resource, like let's say a language model, maybe you have access to 1 million tokens per hour. How do you distribute this resource consumption to certain customers based on their tiers and based on what they are allocated to do? So we see the cell phone companies and the internet companies do this very well. Even though they might have like gigabits of network access, they try to limit the bandwidth of each particular customer or each particular person to a certain quota, and that person does not come and bring their gaming system to suck up all the bandwidth that is available. So if you think about building an application like this, we have some strategies that can help you implement throttling depending on what resource you want to use. Also, there are certain scenarios where you want to process a lot of data to language models or AI services. If you send everything all at once, you might not be able to stay under the allowed quota. So if you think about using queues like Azure Service Bus, like Event Hubs or Kafka, or some of those queuing systems, you can dump the initial input into some kind of queuing system or message broker, and then have some kind of subscriber pattern to pick it up and process it. This makes it safe, and it also helps you to have control. It also allows you to recover if there's a problem in one of the things, and you can come back and process it. But if you don't have any way to queue the input, you can end up losing everything, and it's very hard to recover in that kind of scenario. There's another pattern called like a bulkhead pattern, where you have like different segmentations. So you can use access control, you can use networking to make sure that you split up your components into different segments, so that if something happens in one part of the application, it does not blow up the entire system and affect everybody. In terms of monitoring, we see a lot where like in the hospitals, we have like alarm systems on patients, so that if something is going wrong, we can react immediately. We see the fire alarms, the smoke alarms, smoke detectors. So even though your application is working fine, you always have to have this mindset of always monitoring everything that is happening at all times, and also have a strategy in place to react as soon as something goes wrong. If we see an attack in progress, if we see a security vulnerability being mentioned. So what are some of the strategies that we have to make sure that we can respond to that? Azure Monitor gives us the ability to keep track of different parts of your applications. You can see the CPU, the memory, you can see different log access. And if you're deploying it on Kubernetes, on Azure Functions, and any of those things, you can integrate Azure Monitor very easily. In terms of policies, you can help your junior developers to avoid certain mistakes by restricting how certain things are deployed. For example, you can say that you don't want to allow anyone to use keys on all the resources, so everybody has to use managed identity. That's something you can set as an Azure policy, and that would allow everyone else to comply subconsciously, because they cannot communicate with that resource if they don't comply to your restrictions that you've put in place. We also have Azure Sentinel that allows us to collect data from different environments. It also helps you to detect certain patterns and correlate that to security signals to identify issues that are coming from attackers or bad actors. The application gateway allows you to set up web application firewalls to control access to certain resources, and you can prevent SQL injection, prompt injection, cross-site scripting, and some of those things that we see attackers try to use to bypass certain protocols. A lot of times we talk about just monitoring what is going on in the application layer, but the code itself has to be able to be monitored as well. So if you have dependencies in your application where known vulnerabilities have been identified, it's good for us to keep track of that and for us to be able to respond immediately by creating pull requests. So GitHub Dependable allows us to do that, to identify those CVEs when they are announced, and then it also creates a patch and a pull request for any of those affected packages for you to respond. And then finally, we have the Azure Security Center. So this is very good in helping you to keep track of different workloads across the cloud. So you can monitor and you can detect threats across things like your Kubernetes service, your Azure function, and it will provide insights and actionable recommendations for you to secure your resources, either in real time or after the fact. And it is it really helps when it comes to compliance, if you have certain standards that you have to comply to. So let's go over what we just covered. We talked about making sure that we don't use passwords hard-coded in our applications. So having central identity management systems and using managed identities is a very good way to do that. Making sure that we separate the different backend components from the user experience is a very good idea. Making sure that whoever is trying to access the data in your AI application has the access and also has the authorization to do that is also very important. Keeping all the access to a private network, if that is required, is something that you have to think about. And then we also cover some of the best practices, as well as different strategies and tools that are available for us to monitor the environment and see what is going on. So that's all I had to share with you today. We can take questions towards the end.
Thank you, Israel. I'm going to, just a second.
All right, let me get you to your slide, Jeff. There you go.
So I've got a few examples. I think when we talk about making this real, we need to actually see some examples of what this does and how we can use it in our field to make sure that it's actually producing value. So we developed a race engineer copilot, and what it is, it's powered by Azure OpenAI, and it's designed to streamline race operations by quickly comparing simulations, managing multiple events, and understanding parts availability. And it leads to quicker decision making. And a tool is centralized knowledge hub, and it allows engineers to draw insights from various data sources in real time. Some of the key portions of this that I've seen us use is that it gives you decision-making support. That means it integrates a chat tool within the existing platform. You know, it's more broad than just the race field. I feel like that it's more general in that this is the architecture or the pattern of application that we would do within any type of domain where we would need expertise knowledge, we would need centralized decision making, or we would need to improve access and speed. We've got a video that I'm going to play, and then I want to give you what I think is something it's slightly counterintuitive insight for this. I think information's somewhat measured by how much surprise that you get from it. And so if I can tell you a couple of things about this solution that mean that it's more broad and more general than just what I'm showing you, then I think it'll be more valuable. You know, I think I'm going to pause it simply because I don't want to be humbled on a recorded video by running out of time. So a couple of insights for this. And it also, I think there's an advantage to me not actually going through every one of these slides, and that's that you'll need to come ask me to see everything. So what's counterintuitive about this, or what's the critical insight? There's two of them. One is that you see this tool, and you may not think immediately that your staffing can now be more robust. And what do I mean? So resources on the project or on the race team can be moved around as needed because you have a common thread of history across the staff. That means that knowledge transfer, while it should happen, you don't have to shadow and reverse shadow as much. You know, you have a common thread of memory and history across the race engineer copilot that will take the context from previous events and help you bring that forward. So staffing's more robust. The second is you're not really replacing any of the instincts of the experienced race engineers. What you're doing is you're enhancing it. So this does not run races for you. It's simply a tool to work alongside them. It frees engineers from repetitive calculations and data searching. And I think that's about what we would expect at this level of maturity of AI. Let me move forward. So a couple of teases, and then let me get to the second example that I want to talk about, and that's synthetic data generation. So I'll just kind of speak through this. What it does is this synthetic data generator, it enables teams to create large-scale realistic data sets that mimic production data without exposing any sensitive information. So a couple of things you can do with that. Any set of data that has classified or protected information you would normally fill, you can synthetically create a new instance, so a twin of that information that is not identical. There's no real information that's leaked from this. So it immediately gets rid of issues like privacy restrictions, and it also gets rid of, and I think more importantly, data is available anywhere that you need to work with it. Unless somebody could not see or understand an idea, then you would be able to replicate that data. The exceptions to this would be something that like a trade secret. You wouldn't want to replicate that because even in seeing the image or the kind of residue of that thought, you may be able to backwards engineer that. So why is it important? It enhances test data for more accurate outcomes. You always have it available. You can implement it and generate this data as many times as you need with the right specificity. It's the ability to ship safe, realistic, globally available data supporting distributed teams. And I think that means a lot. So what's counterintuitive about this? It seems obvious. The more test data you have, the better your systems. I think that synthetic data is often perceived as a secondary choice when real data is available. Like I would never use it if I had my actual data, but that's not actually true. Your real data may not actually cover all your edge cases. In fact, if it did, they probably wouldn't be unknown or edge cases to you. So I think that we can fill in some of the dark pixels in the entire landscape. So it's not actually just a second preference or the use only when you can't get to real data. So I think it actually provides more control and more security than production data. So I think it actually can be more beneficial. I think that's, I'm gonna skip that video. I think we have an API test generator, and what that does is allows you to go through and test APIs. And I think that it addresses the limitations of traditional static testing solutions. And I think what we would want to say about that is that it's typically seen as a time savings tool, but what it actually is a process changing tool. It shifts the introduction of tests and process left in that. We have finally an OpenAI accessible art description generator. And this is one that I think is really one of our favorites because what it's done is it enhances art accessibility. So if you've got low vision or no vision, or you haven't seen the art or you want a different way to experience the same art that you've seen, it supports museums, art galleries, any kind of institution that wants to show something to that audience. I think that it makes art universally more accessible and inclusive, and it really sets up a model for AI's role in education and just the possibilities. I think that it kind of counterintuitively demonstrates the way that AI can capture and communicate artistic elements in a way that's deeply descriptive. You can see our work and you can come to us for examples on this, and we're actually doing this at a number of places and events across the world. There's a couple of more elements that I'm going to leave for a conversation with the audience, and so I'd like to go over and take any time now to go over any questions so that it would be open to the audience at this point.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or raise your hand and I'll take you off mute. You're welcome to come out and ask your question live as well.
If there aren't any questions, and I'm going to look for raised hands, I'll just explain what the section on agentic AI, why there's a big switch that's occurring. Initially, what you would want to do is you wanted to adapt your application to using AI, or you'd want to adapt your AI to your application. So you've got your application, then you adapt AI to fit into that. And I think it's going to switch a little bit to probably adapting your application to using AI. So it's a really transformative technology where you're able to give it goals, or you're able to actually just make sure that another AI can use the API capabilities. And then that leads to really getting to what delivers value and not UI elements or elements that aren't useful for the ultimate decision or strategic goal you're trying to do. So it's different than traditional AI models in that it doesn't just perform a predefined tasks. That helps you go for a predefined that you define business impact. And it makes independent decisions without necessarily having explicit instructions, but it does have explicit permissions. And I think it really starts to be the next frontier that we're looking at. I don't know if that's more exciting or if that helps the audience. I've got a lot more to say on it, but I think I'll leave it open to questions.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I appreciate it. And we went pretty fast there, and then we ran a little long on time, so I appreciate you trimming it down. And as Jeff alluded to, if you have additional questions or would like to learn more about some of the demos and examples of AI solutions we've built that Jeff mentioned, please feel free to reach out. That concludes today's session. If you would like a copy of today's presentation or a link to the on-demand recording, please reach out to us at marketing.valorem@reply.com. And we appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you at future events. Thanks, everyone.